Investing Lesson 2, The Power of Compound Interest. In this lesson, you'll learn why it's important to start investing now, why compound interest is important, what the rule of 72 is, and why inflation is destroying the value of our money. There are a lot of ways you can invest your money, but for this module, you're going to learn why it's important to invest long-term using retirement accounts. Compound interest isn't very exciting at first, but when you see how your investments can explode with growth over the years, you'll see why we believe it's so important that you start investing as soon as possible. We briefly covered compound interest back in Lesson 3 of the banking module. Now we're going to take a more in-depth look at how compound interest works. Compounding is the process of growing. Just like when a snowball rolls downhill, it builds upon itself. Compound interest does the same thing. When you invest your money in a retirement account known as the principal amount, the goal is for it to grow over time by earning interest. Compound interest is when you not only earn interest on the principal amount, but also earn interest on the previous interest you earned. To put it more simply, you earn interest on the interest. The rule of 72 is a formula that's used to determine how long it will take your investments to double their value based on your annual rate of return. Basically, you will take the number 72, divide it by the percentage of interest you are earning, known as the annual rate of return. This will tell you how long it will take for your money to double. It can also be used to determine how long it will take for your money to erode over time due to inflation. Side note, if you don't want to do the math, there are tons of Rule of 72 calculators online. So for example, if you invest $1 and get 10% annual rate on your return, your money will double in 7.2 years, which is 72 divided by 10, and be worth a whopping $2. Okay, I know that example isn't very exciting, but if you had $10,000 and watched it turn into $20,000, and then 7.2 years later it was worth $40,000, and then 7.2 years later it was worth $80,000, and then 7.2 years later it was worth $160,000, it just keeps going the earlier you start and the longer you invest. Knowing that you have the ability to make those kinds of gains should be exciting to you. If your investments only earn 3%, then it will take 24 years for them to double. If they earn 7.2%, they'll double every 10 years. If you earn 10%, they'll double every 7.2 years. And if you earn 15%, they'll double in 4.8 years. You can play with the numbers on a Rule of 72 calculator if you want, but the main idea is to understand how long it will take your investments to double based on the rate of return that you get. The earlier you start, the more time your money has to compound. So in these next examples, we're going to use Bankrate.com's investment goal calculator. If you start investing at 18, which by the time you're 65 gives you 47 years to accumulate with no initial investment, a 7.2% annual rate of return, investing $100 per month, you could potentially have up to $434,573 at the age of retirement. That's with only investing $100 a month for the next 47 years of your life. If you put that same amount of money into a regular savings account with a 0.01% interest rate instead, you would only end up with around $56,000. Okay, so let's keep all the numbers the same, but change the rate on investment to 10%, which has been the stock market average rate of return over the last 30 years. You could earn up to $1,093,503 before taxes and inflation. That's a huge jump. You invested the same amount of money, but it compounded at a higher rate. Okay, so once again, let's keep all the numbers the same, except this time we're going to adjust the years to accumulate. Instead of getting started at 18, let's say you wait 2 years and start at age 20. This gives you 45 years to invest before turning 65 instead of 47 years. By waiting those 2 extra years to get started, it drops down to $901,545 before taxes and inflation. That's still a lot of money, but the later you get started, the less time your money has to compound. And for the record, you can invest beyond age 65. We're just using that age as an example because it's a really common age to retire. If you wait until you're 30 years old to start investing, which is the average age people start investing in America, that would give you 35 years for your money to compound before turning 65. With all of the other numbers the same, it would drop all the way down to $339,879 before taxes and inflation. As you just saw, the later you get started, the less time your money has to grow. These numbers are just estimates based on a lot of different factors, but you get the point. Start now. Even if it's only $50 or $100 a month, these examples were meant to be realistic for young adults. If you can invest more than that, then we encourage you to take advantage of time because it's definitely on your side when you're young. We talked about inflation back in the banking module, but it's worth mentioning again. Inflation is normally a long-term rise in the price for all goods and services. However, we currently have the highest inflation rates we've seen in the last 40 years. At 8.6%, it will take just over 8 years for your money to be worth half of what it's worth today, which isn't so long-term. Side note, we got this number by using the rule of 72 again. Only this time, it's showing how long it will take for your money's value to be cut in half instead of doubling. Normally, inflation is barely noticeable because it tends to stay around 2 or 3%. At these rates, it takes between 24 and 36 years for your money to lose half of its purchasing power. So inflation being this high right now is a really big deal. The real rate of return is when you subtract inflation from how much your investments earned. The goal of your long-term investing at a minimum should be to beat inflation. That's obviously important because, as you just learned, the value of your money goes down over time. $1,000 today will not have the same purchasing power 30 years from now. During normal times, it's pretty easy to outperform inflation by investing. The average rate of return for the stock market over the last 30 years has been roughly 10%. So if you subtracted the average inflation rate over the last 30 years, which is around 3%, that means your investments not only outpaced inflation, but your profits grew in actual value by 7%. In addition to adjusting for inflation, there are other factors that will eat away at your gains, such as taxes and investing fees. We'll go into how those affect your investments later in this module. You just learned about the power of compound interest and why investing at an early age is so important. We went over the rule of 72 that is used to determine the rate at which your investments double. It can also be used to determine the rate at which the value of your money will be cut in half due to inflation. Lastly, you learned how to determine the real rate of your return on investments. In the next lesson, you'll learn about individual retirement accounts and 401ks.